this is PK Entertainment and we're back again, and here now we have another video for you, and this will be a review of Justice League Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 1. Now there'll probably be spoilers here for this movie, so just beware when going to this overall video. Now Crisis is the first of 3 parts of an animated adaptation of the famous comic book storyline of the same name. The story itself was a massive comic crossover series created in 1985 to 1986 by Marv Wolfman and late artist George Perez. Its goal was to unify all of the famous DC comic book characters into one single continuity to make things far more accessible for readers. The plot there being a powerful being known as the Anit Monitor who begins to destroy all multiple Earths within the universe. His counterpart known as the Monitor strives to assemble all superheroes from different universes in order to stop the large-scale threat. And this animated story very much follows that outline by having the Flash, or Barry Allen, as its central character. And in the beginning we have multiple scenes of him at various stages of his life, whether it's working with the likes of Superman or Green Lantern, or also his more quieter life in getting to know Iris West within a diner, who would eventually go on to be his longtime partner and wife. Now things start to change drastically as Barry starts to drift in and out of different universes. And over the course of the story, we see him coming across various individuals as his life progresses with Iris, and also as he puts plans together with the likes of Superman, Batman and Green Arrow in order to avoid the crisis. Now if that seems a very short abridged version or outline of the story, that's because sadly in terms of the story, part 1 is incoherent and extremely confusing to watch. The narrative just jumps from one subplot to the next with no sense of style or poise or control. Unless you're a super hardcore DC fan, then you'll be lost very quickly as to what exactly is going on. And even as a hardcore fan, you'd have to step back from your infection of the source material or the characters to objectively see this story as something that's not just well put together. Now adapting the source material was always going to be a difficult task. The original story itself was criticised for being over convoluted, so trying to condense it down into a single standalone story, even if it's in 3 parts, is still very challenging. Now this type of story will only really work if you're dealing with a smaller scale or indeed a smaller group of characters. That will give you more time to develop them and allow the audience to be fully invested in their journey as you go across the various twists and turns and parallel timelines. Probably one of the best examples of this is Back to the Future 2, where you have a similar narrative of Marty McFly going back in time and coming across various other versions of himself and his family. But because we keep this focus solely on Marty with Doc Brown helping him, for all of the twists and turns it still remains compelling and doesn't really get overly confusing, despite the crazy time twists and mechanics. Now the only other way for this type of story to work is if it comes at the end of a long running universe. We have a long time attachment to the characters, so that gives you some familiarity to get you ready for all of the time jumping and time hopping across different Earths. But even when we saw the CW Arrowverse, which had that well established universe, even that version struggled with its 5-part adaptation of Crisis in trying to keep things coherent and compelling. And after a while with this movie, I just became indifferent as to what was going on. The movie didn't really care enough about setting up each of the parallel Earths or the characters involved. They just appear random and scattershot, so as a viewer I just didn't care about any of the characters that were appearing. You get a whole multitude of characters and alternate versions appearing, and none of them really make any impression, which again, you may feel indifferent as a fan depending on your affection for the source material. And the film just meanders on with no real sense of intrigue or mystery or awe or wonder, many things that you associate normally with the DC universe. Now yes, many will argue that the DC mythology itself has always been this very extravagant fusion of magic and science, fantasy and realism, seriousness and escapism. But despite all of those elements, you still need that coherency, otherwise everything that appears on screen means absolutely nothing, and that's exactly what happens with this movie here. Now ironically, the best parts of the film are the more quiet and non-time travelling moments. When the movie calms down and we focus much more on the relationship between Barry and Iris, there is a semblance of emotional weight and poignancy. We have them going through various stages of getting together for the first time, getting married, getting older and dealing with separation. And this gives the film some nice moments, nothing truly exceptional, but they probably stand out more because nothing else throughout the film really resonates with you. And overall as a complete piece, there's nothing really much more to say about part 1. And what's really disappointing in how the film just really ends. It's such a flat, nondescript moment. You're surprised that when it actually arrives, not only because of its abruptness, but also because with this type of storyline, you'd normally assume that there'd be some sort of cliffhanger or end credit scene to really tease your excitement for part 2. But that's not what happens here. The movie literally just ends. I'm not sure if the producers really know what they're going for in terms of this storyline. They appreciate the fact that something like this can't be told in one singular film, and at least telling the story over 3 parts gives them more time to fully incorporate all of the parts from the source material. But we'd assume that part 1 would be the beginning phase of the story, setting the foundations for when part 2 and part 3 will introduce far more crazier concepts and large-scale conflicts and ideas as we raise the stakes for the overall final battle. So if you can't get part 1 right in terms of a sound story, then it doesn't bode well for parts 2 and part 3. Now, I know there was some hype going into this adaptation. It was very much being sold as the culmination of the Tomorrowverse of DC animated movies, which started with Superman Man of Tomorrow a couple of years ago. But if we really think about it, the Tomorrowverse is really just a name only. All of the films within this era of DC animation were really all standalone as opposed to the new 52 continuity movies that we got, or indeed the legendary Bruce Timm and Paul Dini animated universe, which still stands today as the greatest screen translation of the DC characters. None of the movies within the Tomorrowverse have been anything special or standalone, and I'm still not liking the art style with all of its heavy lines and static movement. It just looks really cheap and under-resourced. And I still don't understand why all of these animation adaptations can't evoke much more the art style from the original source material. So as I mentioned before, sadly, Justice League Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 1 just ends up being yet another disappointing DC movie in terms of animation, of which we've had a substantial run now of really underdeveloped and unsatisfying films. Tomorrowverse really has been a step down from what we got within the New 52 continuity, and is leagues behind the standout elements that we were getting previously with the likes of Flashpoint Paradox, Batman Under the Red Hood, The Dark Knight Returns Part 1 and Part 2, and also Superman Public Enemies and Superman Batman Apocalypse. And we're all guessing where exactly DC animation will go forward once we see the heralding of James Gunn and his new era for DC. But for right now, this Justice League adaptation is sadly, yet again, very disappointing, very convoluted and confusing, and once more a low point within DC content within the last couple of years. So those are my overall thoughts and feelings and review of Justice League Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 1. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and if you have any other suggestions regarding any other movies, television series, subject matter within the pop entertainment and culture scene, then also drop me a suggestion and I will see if I can cover that material for you at a later date within the channel. Please also hit like the subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you very, very soon.